James, episode 24. After today's episode, I'm convinced we're living in a simulation.
Well, I'm not quite sure about that, although Elon Musk does think that. That was pretty bizarre / awesome. So we just interviewed the most influential meme account in marketing and ad tech, a guy or girl, we truly don't know, called Ad Tech God. And aside from it being bizarre that this person changed their voice and we couldn't see them on video, just a delightful person and seems like really, really well-intentioned.
You'd be hard-pressed to find someone that wants to push ad tech forward like this person talks about it.
Yeah, so this week, this account, if you don't follow it, you should. They have 15,000 followers. It's at AdTechGod. But they interview a ton of really big names. They just interviewed Eric Seufert. So we thought it'd be interesting to kind of turn the tables and interview he, she, them, whoever this is. And so this is our interview with the Ad Tech God. Hope you enjoy it.
Today we have the Lord of RTB, the God of programmatic prophecy, the savior of ad tech sinners, the one and only Ad Tech God. ATG, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm really excited about doing this podcast today. So it's been great meeting you, Daniel and James, before the call. So this is going to be a great experience.
Likewise, and for anyone listening, this is literally a voice from the sky coming down talking to us. We don't know who this is. We don't see a face. It is just this deep deity voice that we're all hearing. But why don't we kick it off, and why don't you tell us a little bit about your origin story, where you came from, how Ad Tech God came to be?
It's a pretty easy story. 2020, we had something called a pandemic. We found ourselves locked up at home with a lot of free time. Free time meaning all day and night, pretty much at home. And I've always been super active on Twitter, X, as we call it now. But I was always hesitant to speak my opinion on particular topics. I think you find the dominant, influencers on LinkedIn, which vary from the influencers on Twitter. And I never felt that I was comfortable enough to comment or give my true opinion of things. So I was a passive kind of reader. I would like or share, but I never really took part in the conversation. One day I saw the account, I think he's called like Twitter God or something. And I loved it. I was like, this is amazing. This guy posts like he's God all the time. Super catchy image. He shuns people. He speaks the truth. It's an amazing kind of parody kind of account. I'm like, man, we need that for ad tech, and I would be so comfortable doing it. So I jumped in, and people like Matt Barash right away was like, I don't know who you are, buddy, but here's a little boost. Terry Kawaja started entertaining it. Ari Paparo started entertaining it, and slowly it started building up traction to where I was, celebrating 1,000 followers, and then 3, and then 7, and then 10. And, it just caught on over the years. So it's been fun.
It's amazing. Well, also just kind of funny, given that Daniel and James are both biblical names. I feel like we really are in the presence of greatness. In terms of building it, I mean, did you find it's funny? We've started obviously doing this podcast, and we've tried to be more active on social media, but like we've almost had to like force ourselves to just be like, every week we're going to record a podcast, or like we got to just like put out these posts. Like, did it start like that, or is it more like you just had an idea and you're like, I'm saying it, like I can do this now?
No, it just started with, in the evening time when the house is a little bit more quiet and we're done doing what we have to do as, parents and as workers, I would just pick up my phone and start tweeting. And I started finding myself getting a little bit more, I guess, controversial. I feel very comfortable asking questions I know the answer to, but I know that people differ in their opinions, and that creates a lot of interaction with the posts. And so as I started doing, better and better posts, I started throwing out memes out there because I saw DigiChad. I'm like, man, this guy is insane. He's got like 100,000 followers. I said, it's kind of fun. Like, maybe I'll get a little edgy on the memes, but I suck. Like, I'm just not good at it. Let me just stick to asking questions that we all know the answer to and may disagree. And that seems to be the route. So it's really not work. I don't schedule anything. I really don't. Not one post has ever been pre-scheduled or thought about. I don't have an agenda with what I'm posting. I have no real long-term goal with this other than I'm just riding the wave, seeing where it goes.
It's awesome. I mean, like, sincerely, actually, like, thank you for doing it. It was like actually kind of inspiring to us that we could do this, just seeing people in like what is like a niche community. Like the fact that there is an audience for it is encouraging. I mean, you have like 15,000 followers. Crazy. So thank you for doing it.
Of course. It's been fun.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit before we even started recording, but the content you put out, like you said, it is not just kind of garbage content or kind of silly questions or poking fun at people or things in the industry. I mean, you're actually talking about real topics, divisive topics, things that people have strong opinions about. And so I imagine it could have been easy to go kind of the funny, let's just poke fun at ad tech, this isn't rocket science kind of direction. But you chose a much more intellectually stimulating direction. So like what was that choice like, and what have you seen come from that?
I think it started probably by seeing a lot of LinkedIn press releases, and it gets a little stale. And this happened a few years ago where I read a press release, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, another company released something that was almost identical to it. And they're like, industry leading, we're ready to rock and roll. Nobody's going to be able to do this but us. Like, somebody just said the same thing 2 weeks ago. Like, this is getting a little stale. And so I think on my end that kind of sparked okay, we're solving for problems that we are all fully aware of. We know it, right? We know fragmentation is a problem. We know measurement is getting resolved, but still a problem. We know frequency capping is a problem. We know competitive separation in connected TV is a problem, but they're all being solved and everybody talks about it all the time. The question is what are the topics that we're not talking about? And what are the competitive advantages of companies who dominate and lead the industry in one direction, and those who do not dominate and are smaller in the industry but don't have a voice to share what product they're bringing to the market. And that's why, if you notice, I post a lot of what smaller startups do and kind of mid-sized companies do. I don't necessarily post what the big companies are doing. The reason for it is they have the money to throw at the market to promote their products. The mid-sized companies might not. And I feel like that is where they need a bigger boost and a voice to just get their name out into the market.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. I guess thinking of like talking about the big companies, one thing that we talk a lot about internally and then on the podcast is just sort of the tension between like the walled gardens and sort of the open web. And we kind of think of ourselves as like walled garden guys, and a lot of the stuff that you post on, at least, I feel like touches more, I don't know if it's a fair assumption, but more on like the RTB and the programmatic side. Do you have like, love to know kind of just like the ad tech god, like point of view on like which of those paths, if any, is better, or like which one do you kind of like fall on the side of?
Great question. I have mixed feelings about it. In one aspect, if I look at the walled gardens that exist today, the big social media platforms, the Rokus of the world, you think to yourself, if I was in that position, how would I benefit from the data that I collect, the audience that I have, to maximize revenue and still kind of drive those KPIs for marketers? On the flip side, when you are not a part of the walled garden, you look and you wonder, how transparent is this particular inventory that I'm accessing? What is being obfuscated that I cannot target? And how can I grow my business considering a majority of the spend is coming through these walled gardens? And so I have a very mixed feeling about it. I think if I worked at Roku, I would probably love it. I would say this is amazing. If I didn't work at Roku and I was a smaller provider, right? I think right now the last stat I saw was 40% of connected TV ad spend is on Roku. I mean, that's a huge percentage of the market. So whatever they're doing is working, and I'm a huge supporter. But you have to consider the implications of, higher cost of inventory. You need to take into consideration the lack of transparency. There's a lot of things that outside world doesn't benefit because of these walled gardens.
And there are a lot of things that I think agency holdcos and large advertisers in particular try to blend between walled gardens and open web, whether it's certifications, things about transparency, things about ad fraud and ad fraud measurement. What's your take on, like, is that a fair thing for these advertisers to ask kind of very opposing philosophically built systems to kind of mesh on? Or like, is that something the industry has to come together and try to decide? Or like, how do we kind of bridge that gap?
I think we're getting there. I mean, we've recently seen various partnerships happen between major, companies like Roku and Freewheel. I think you're starting to see that the fragmentation is slowly breaking up. You're seeing that more collaboration is happening, and these walled gardens are working more closely to deliver better products and better measurable solutions to their advertisers. I think we're getting there. I think, if you consider where we were in streaming television in particular over the last, 7-8 years, we really saw a boom in 2020. Prior 2017, 2016, we didn't have these major players in the market, or we did, but they weren't as aggressively targeting the market. But since the launch of Paramount Plus, and you're talking about Disney Plus, and you're talking ad-supported Netflix or the HVOD model, and the fast channel growth over the last 12 months, you're seeing that in order for the industry to grow, we have to work together. Because in the end, it's the marketing dollars that we all want. And so we have to cater to the advertiser.
And, one thing I was kind of just wonder from the like open web perspective, what would the ideal end state look like? I've listened to a bunch of stuff that like Jeff Green's talked about, and, kind of looking at it like it's a NASDAQ where, everyone can kind of transact. But is that like what you think the ideal end goal looks like? Or like, and I'm basically trying to get at is like, in our world, we would look at it as like, kind of there'd be like the Facebook audience network was actually kind of perfect to us. We're like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like you can tie this identity, it provides a lot of value. Like, what does the ideal world look like in your guys' mind?
You're asking really good questions, and you're making me think about two different scenarios. Now, are we talking about a dominant 5 or 10 players in the market that are a walled garden and the rest live in an open web? Or does this require full collaboration across the board to promote the open web? In my opinion, the end state will most likely be, I hate to say this, an open web. But in order for that to be done, we need support from advertisers to target open web initiatives and to help drive it forward. Until that happens, walled gardens will continue to dominate. And I'm not sure the walled gardens are going to go down very easily.
I can say, as a former walled garden guy, I think
they're not doing it.
They're not going to do it, but they may be forced to by the market. And one thing that is interesting in that scenario of the world where it is all open. I don't know if you thought much about this, but in that there's a lot of value right now with walled gardens. In particular, people don't talk about this a lot, but they can provide trade credit, right? So they're really, really big companies that can basically offer loans for all practical purposes to small advertisers to pay them in like net 30, net 60. When you go into this open web and the demand side is more fragmented, and maybe there's not this like central kind of clearinghouse like a Facebook or a Google, like, do you see that actually ironically hurting smaller businesses? I'm not sure if you've thought about like the knock-on effects there.
No, I haven't. I think you make a good point. Who else in the market pays net 30? Well, we'd be happy to see net 180 at times. Yeah. And I think that consistent payment cycle is super important to just keep the industry ticking. The late payment cycle is brutal to our industry and should be addressed. And I know there are companies out there that are looking into it and are working on it. But no, I have not thought that far downstream in terms of what the impact would be by having later payments or the impact on small business.
And maybe one other thing that it seems like is a challenge for open web and almost just a natural evolution of how open web was developed. But more recently, SSPs and DSPs are starting to blur the lines on what they actually are. right? SSPs are starting to build
Right.
demand-side platforms. Demand-side platforms are going publisher direct. And so you're creating this very fragmented market. Whereas if you go to Facebook, you know the inventory you're getting, you know who you're buying from, you know what you're paying. If you go to Snap, same thing. If you go to Pinterest or Reddit, the same thing. But now there's all of these DSPs that are kind of SSPs, all of these SSPs that are kind of DSPs. And so what comes from this? What is the natural kind of course that we're going to see from this action that these companies are taking, do you think?
Like I mentioned, the market dictates the product. I think if we take a look at the historical purpose of a DSP, ROI, KPIs, deliver in full, and back out into a profitable campaign, it's fully in the control and in the benefit of the advertiser. But that doesn't necessarily translate into the benefit of a publisher. Mm-hmm. And so the SSPs are really there to drive better CPMs, improve user experience, and generate as much possible revenue because they do have costs by operating these sites or apps. And so by combining the two, I think what we've seen is Trade Desk in particular has been exploring the fastest, most efficient path to accessing inventory across multiple SSPs. And in one aspect, I see, I'm using Trade Desk just as an example, they are a trustworthy, massive demand-side platform in the market. I don't think their intentions are to harm the market at all. But I think what we're seeing is where are the dollars going? Where is the inventory cost and where is the revenue being generated? And what is the breakdown of the dollar as it flows from marketer to publisher? And so a lot of the demand-side platforms have started going after publishers direct because they realize that they have enough spend to go direct. And I think that's a benefit to them and to their marketers. And on the supply side, they look at, hey, the DSPs are coming after our publisher profits and our publishers' revenues. And so we're going to skip the DSP, create our own, and allow marketers to come direct. And we're eliminating fees in the middle in the process. So I don't necessarily think any particular side is at war with the other, even though I tweet that because it creates a lot of engagement. I think the reality is everybody's trying to squeeze as much performance as they can. And sometimes you have to blend the two. And creating a powerful DSP while having an SSP that generates revenue for your publisher is really a benefit to everybody. Mm-hmm. But we have to see how it shakes out over time. Like this is a pretty aggressive change in the market that's catching traction over the last few years.
You've seen sort of, I think, more on the ad tech side than most people based on just the tweets that we see that you talk about and sort of the context that you have. Have you seen a period of like such just, kind of not confusion, but just evolution that is similar to where we are now? Like given, to your point, the end result may be a huge DSP and what we now think of as a huge SSP, both being the DSPs and competing with each other. Like, have you ever seen a moment like this where it was just kind of so unclear?
No, not in my experience, but I do think with the fall of multiple SSPs that have shut down over the last few years, right? Let's say EMX is one, and with the loss of a major DSP like MediaMath as a DSP on the DSP side, I think you look at the vacuum that it creates for competition. So MediaMath was a DSP that has been operating for years, had a relatively large size number of clients that utilize that platform. They were now faced with a very limited selection of DSPs in the market that could potentially support their business. And so when they look at DSPs as an option in the future, there are really very minimal options for them to move to. And so that creates a lot more power on the demand side platform, right? On the demand side platform market, right? Who are the major players in the market? We know them. It's probably one handful that could support major enterprise type clients. And then on the supply side platform, a few of them have died out over the last few years. And you look at, well, who's remaining? Again, only a handful of supply side platforms. And so what's created is a lack of competition. And the dominant players really have a lot of control now as their competition dies out. So it's an industry trend, and I think we have to see where it all leads over the next 12 to 24 months.
With new channels, though, like connected TV, like HVOD or AVOD, retail media, does this open up an opportunity for new technology companies or maybe smaller players to start to compete more heavily with those new formats? Whereas a large company has to re-engineer some of its infrastructure or retool its team and its processes to be able to support this. Do you think this is an opportunity, or is this just another example of the Trade Desk and some of the bigger players just scooping up more market share?
I think it's always an opportunity. I really don't ever think that there isn't an opportunity. I mean, look at me, I'm a meme account. I think there's always an opportunity in market to make things work. I really do. I look at things really positively, and for the most part, when I look at this industry. Deprecation of the cookie creates a bunch of various companies that are looking to solve for the problem. The death of an SSP creates the opportunity for another SSP to capture more spend through these DSPs that were transactional, which means potentially more revenue, more profits, more growth. I see this industry going through a little bit of a bumpy time, which we have been for the last 12 to 18 months. That being said, it's not over. I think as we see companies evolve, and a lot of the people who are out of work right now are really spinning up some great ideas, but they're early stage. Someone that was laid off a year ago is not ready to go to market with their product. But I could tell you, I know of at least 4 or 5 people that have been laid off and are engineers and are very familiar with ad tech that have started spinning up products. And they're starting to think about how they're going to market. And the products that they're coming up with and the solutions that they have are addressing the issues that they were aware of at their prior employer. So they're definitely targeting a market that they feel needs to be addressed. So I think we have a lot of opportunity over the next, year and a half or so to see a rebound and a growth of a lot of, small to mid-size startups.
Yeah, along those lines of smaller companies, I guess 2 questions. One, have you ever thought about starting an ad tech god venture fund or like a DAO or maybe? And then, I'm just curious if you ever have, because it could be really interesting.
I had this convo yesterday. Yeah, I had this conversation yesterday. I wouldn't say a venture capital fund. I would say it's time for smaller and mid-sized companies to get the attention that they need because the solutions they have are valuable and needed. And I thought about this yesterday. I had a conversation with someone yesterday who's a close friend. They need to be brought to the table. They need to be presented to the right people at the right time. And many times these larger companies will not give a 10-person startup the time of day. But they're the only ones who could really scale the solution to anything that's sizable. So I have thought of, I don't know if I want to call it like the Knight's Table, the Round Table, I don't know. But I've thought about how could I create a platform for not only networking and meeting and asking questions, but a platform for a small startup to be in touch with a major company that may be interested in at least exploring what they have, and to have that conversation and then pivot and build what the bigger company wants. So yeah, I think about this stuff 24/7. So yeah. Yes.
I think that would be, I think it's needed. And I think it's the anonymity that you actually have makes it, I think, such like a comfortable place to do it, where a startup could feel like it's not like the pressure of some executive at XYZ company to kind of judging them. So I think that'd be really cool. Are there any early stage companies just in general that you're excited about, that you just sort of think people should be looking into? Not trying to pick favorites, but just like in general, things that you're seeing out there that you think is just really cool.
I'm trying not to pick favorites. I try to stay neutral. And just because I don't want to sales pitch for someone that I've spoken to that I feel like they've got something unique in market. But if you look towards the future and what we need, I would say cookieless solutions are a good investment. AI solutions are a good investment, should be explored. And I think anything with connected TV, ad unit changes, or creative solutions is very big. Because as we see cord cutters, slow down, we're not cord cutting as quickly as we were 3 years ago. but you're finding that the user experience on connected TV is becoming more and more seamless. And with that comes the flexibility and the comfort to try new things. And we're seeing it with various like native type of ads that are launched, as well as like pause screens that are launched. And you're able to scan a QR or go to a particular domain. So I think anyone that's providing a new creative type of solution in the fast growing CTV space and AI space, I think is key.
And anything in kind of the measurement, ad fraud, transparency areas that you're seeing that are interesting, either companies or technologies that you think have the potential to really solve some of the challenges that the industry is facing there?
Was it iSpot that just announced a pretty big partnership yesterday, or acquisition yesterday? I think iSpot's a great solution. I think Nielsen's starting to launch better and better products. I think they went through a rough period of time. Ad fraud, to be honest, in my opinion, human is the best. It always has been, in my view, formerly White Ops. I think they're good, but I think the fraud starts at a different point in the process. I think there is the fraud of bot farms and somebody somewhere with a server creating inventory, and there's misrepresentation of inventory, which is a different type of fraud. And with a very large reseller industry, we need to be careful. And I think we need to value the inventory we have across these premium CTV publishers. And we need to understand the value there and pay the dues to get that premium inventory. And so that's my personal perspective on it.
Interesting. Yeah. And when it comes to, I guess, premium inventory, at least for me, I do end up going back to like the Trade Desk in a lot of ways, which when I hear about that, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but your take, it sounds like, is like they're doing the best. Like it's not like they're this master plan where they're going to become kind of their own sort of version of Facebook, but like it's just like they're playing the hand they got.
They're still tiny. I mean, if you think about Trade Desk, like fine, their market cap is massive. Let me rephrase that. They're not tiny, but their market cap is massive. They dominate a market. They've done a very good job. In the scope of things, they're tiny in comparison to Google. Like they're still not a competitor to them. And I forgot who posted this on LinkedIn, but they posted a poll. Do you think the Trade Desk is trying to go after Google, or do you think the Trade Desk is trying to kill the other smaller DSPs in the market? I don't think they're trying to kill the smaller DSPs in the market. I think they're trying to expand the market altogether by taking a piece away from Google. So I do not think that the Trade Desk is bad for the market. And I think they're doing what they can to expand those budgets overall and move it away from the dominant player, which is Google.
And you mentioned, the Trade Desk market cap. That's something that we just like, again, as former Snapchat employees, we always kind of wonder how in the world is like the Trade Desk worth more than Snap and Pinterest combined from a market cap perspective, just given that those two companies get to like print their own inventory and own it all and all the benefits of that. Do you have a point of view of like why a dominant DSP is valued that way? Do you think that makes sense?
All right, I'm looking at it now. Trade Desk market cap, 40 billion. Pinterest is 17 billion. One of them, I won't say which one, doesn't necessarily grow at the same rate and doesn't necessarily have the same profit margins as the other. When you talk about the Trade Desk in particular, and you look at the overall historical spend in marketing or advertising over the last 50 years, you see that spend consistently goes up over a long period of time. We might have like little bumps here and there, or bad years or slower years. But the Trade Desk in particular is riding a wave of both ad spend increasing, inflation, and is not dependent on the users. Pinterest is working on retaining their users. Facebook is trying to retain their users. And so when you think about a platform like a DSP, they're really riding the wave of ad spend increases. And whether it's a bad quarter or a bad year, long term, the ad spend across connected TV over the next 30 years is going to grow. And I think people are betting on the future. It is the new TV. So I think they justify it. I think that in general, it is a a market leader, and I think it'll continue to grow.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Just the expansion opportunity, obviously, but that's a good segue into. We've got a few questions for you that we want to fire off. Get your quick take on. The first, what prophecies do you have for EdTech? As the deity, what prophecies are there?
Retail media networks, CTV, and AI are the fastest growing for the next 3 years. Find your investments there. Get a piece now, and then follow the growth. I think the cookieless world is also a fantastic opportunity, but I think we're going to see a little bit more challenges this year. I don't think we're necessarily out of it. I'm starting to hear the markets say it's a little soft or softer than they expected. We had a good little bump for 3 or 4 months, and it seems like it's softening out, maybe before the Q4 revenue bump, but hang in there. And I think stay focused on your product and your users and the user experience. Continue to explore better and improved solutions for your marketers. And in the end, don't forget that the marketers are who we service. So if we can service them, provide them with something unique that drives value, then you will make it through, the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
What about the future of ATG? What does that have in store?
Daniel, I told you this before. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is fun. I'm trying to create a forum. I hate to use the term town hall because that's used by somebody else, but he's got billions. I want to create a comfortable space for people who work in the industry to talk, to exchange numbers, to have conversations, to ask dumb questions, to educate each other, and to strike deals. So that is, I think, at a core focus, what I'm trying to do is just create a network of industry people that are there to help each other. We'll see where it goes. I launched the Slack channel, and overnight it was 500 people, to the point where Slack killed the link. So now I need to send a new link every 24 hours before it resets. So that was incredible. Turned into sponsorship opportunities, which is also incredible. I realize I don't have a bank account, so I got to do that somehow. So as I'm kind of turning this to an open forum, it's really just to help people out. I just want people to network, get better jobs, and really fill the gap in their knowledge in the least embarrassing way. People should be comfortable with asking questions to friends, colleagues, competitors.
I love that. I think we've said it a number of times on this podcast already today, but what you're doing is truly the Lord's work.
Yeah, Daniel, I'm not getting rich, that's for sure. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's amazing. I like helping people out. It's just the way I live my life. So that's just how I like to do.
And so where can listeners follow you, and then where can sponsors get in touch if they want to sponsor a Slack channel or help move this forward?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on X. I'm on Instagram. I don't use Reddit. I really don't even know how to use it. But generally, they can join the Slack channel, or they can just message me on LinkedIn, and we can set up a call and we can discuss the opportunities there. And it's again not a sales pitch tool for brands or companies. It's really just to create a forum to where they are industry experts and they can assist.
That's great. We'll put all of that in the show notes. If people haven't joined the Slack channel, James and I are in there. People should definitely join. I mean, right now I see all 500 plus. But anyway, ATG, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Thank you.
Before you go, we need your help. If you enjoyed this week's episode of Taking Inventory, then subscribe or rate wherever you listen to the podcast. And while you're at it, please share this episode or your favorite episode with a friend. We'll be back next week with another episode of Taking Inventory. See you then.